Hey.
Hello. How is everyone? Wow. It's as much enthusiasm as I had expected, given the agenda content. So, okay. So I've been asked to convey this, so I will vocalize the stuff from Craig, as is my understanding. I don't know who has asked to develop a plan, but I think the current ask is to deliver decomposed CI implementation into production by the end of October to realize headroom improvements. I think the like A and B and C, I think I don't really need to, actually, I think that's kind of it. I think all of this kind of makes sense. I think the most important thing for us as a group to discuss at this point is truly, what your perception is of that specific ask, right? And that's something that I would like to capture, because that's important, because otherwise we may get ourselves into a not very great situation. So I'll start with Camille.
I think my perception there is like a limited parallelism that we can apply with increasing amount of the team members. That we need to go through some of these challenges before, and we are still like very early in the phase of like this development and actually finish developing these changes. So from my like involvement with production deployments, this is usually what takes like the most of the time, because of like many granular steps that you need to make on the running system. So since we are not really like truly yet ready in the majority of the cases to approach production, it's also really hard like to expect that production that we'll be able to deploy these changes like, let's say, in the 1.5 month or like similar amount of time to the GitLab.com, because we may approach staging at some point. So my concern, like with the with just having these like using these improvements is like we only control half of the story, which is like development. Another half, which is production and rollout SRE. It's something that we are not yet ready to accept to a big extent. We may be able to accept that with the sum of the work that Dylan and Adam you are doing, but there's like a limited amount of the things that we can really engage SRE today with.
I think we can engage them to actually be deploying all the production database infrastructure, which is it's the second paternity cluster, getting that up and running. It's going to stream from the other one to keep in sync. I think we could actually have people executing on that today from SRE, and it will take a couple of them at least.
Yeah, so I think what Camille said kind of holds, right? It's like, we cannot do this work, right? It needs to come out of infrastructure because they have the access. So essentially, that would be something where we can say, well, this is out of our control, right? We need a team of SREs, right? Likely, to actually accelerate that. And I think otherwise this becomes even less feasible. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. But also like rollout for this to be, let's say, complete, you mean it's like you switch over. And it's gonna take many steps to switch over, because we're just gonna have to fix a lot of aspects in the application while we discover more of them. So I'm kind of like anticipating really heavy percentage rollouts or whatever else that would allow us to validate aspects of the application. So looking at like the past experience with the percentage rollouts, with the production rollout of smaller scale, it just takes time simply. Like like it just takes time, and there's like limited amount of the work that you can parallelize. We can have, of course, like start doing things earlier, but it's still gonna take time, let's say, like to roll out each individual tranche, because it's gonna require a few people involved on making a call, then like testing, rise and repeat number of times. So uh, I'm usually very optimistic person as for the timelines, maybe sometimes over optimistic. So take even like my like these estimates to be also quite optimistic.
I usually triple every timeline that I get in my head. That's what I do.
I mean, like I'm looking at the, let's say, pages migration that like was significantly easier to execute, and it took like 50 or twice longer there than we anticipated, and it was like on very small portion of the system. So I don't expect that it's gonna be different. Simply, like so. I don't know. That's my perception. But it's more like I wish we could do it faster, but I think that it's unlikely to happen.
Dylan, you had a couple more comments.
Yeah, I think there are some things we can be doing in parallel that we know we've got to do, and I don't know, it maybe feels like from your perspective, Camille, you're maybe struggling to keep up with all the things that are going on, and yeah, but I think we are at the point where we can possibly distribute a few things that you've already like kind of set the path on, and people can just look at like that CI merge request that you created and just start removing joins. We know what that looks like. We know we have to do it to get this job done, and we could have a couple more developers working on that, but we descoped that. And then I just think we can also be engaging database reliability engineers and SREs today. If this is the company-wide initiative, but those are the people that ultimately can get this work done. And until they're involved, we're always at least a few months away from getting anything done.
Yes, I fully agree. Like if you're engaging early stuff, but I'm still don't think that this changes a lot as for the actual rollout of stuff, because it is usually take more steps.
Camille, you mentioned a percentage rollout before. Is there actually something you think we're going to do by percentage? Because that's not my perception of what we're going to do.
I mentioned percentage rollout because like in my head, I'm starting to see like a pattern that like we replicate all data, we start treating that as a read-only, as a replica, and this is how we test if everything goes like with the connectivity, with the failovers, function properly before we actually do switchover. Because like when we do switchover, it's really like one-off thing. Like we cannot really go back after that point. So we need to somehow embrace from the infra side, like if all the configurations are correct, if we can handle that many connections, if we have all the monitoring in place, if these databases can actually handle that, and we need to somehow use that in the way initially that is revertible. And the only way that we can do that is revertible, because Postgres doesn't have like primary way of operating. It's only have a single active. It's by simply trying to leverage that as a replica. But this is really like the first step, because as soon as we switch over, we only got like the half of our like gains, because we still have to drop all data. And now the question, usually dropping all data is something additionally risky that we need to test and validate.
Yeah,
because like you have two aspects to solve. Like one is a writes and tuples, and second one is like data store. Probably we're gonna be fine with just solving the first one initially and delaying the second one, the data store, because data store is not really that big of the concern. But then it's also like, I think, putting correct expectations. But that's the tricky part. We need to somehow, or maybe not really. I was thinking about the foreign key dropping them, but we cannot really drop the foreign keys before we. Sorry, we cannot really like drop all data and and like we can drop foreign keys earlier, but we cannot drop associated data before we actually do switchover. So we kind of have two brains right now.
Yeah, we want to drop the foreign keys now. That's what I'm thinking. We want to start dropping foreign keys that we know we won't be able to use in future now, and we need to replace them with Ruby code that does cascading deletes.
Yes, dependent delete all effectively, right? Or something along that.
Yeah,
so the thing is like we need to somehow an automated way to discover that we have relations that doesn't have foreign keys and then needs to be manually deleted by Ruby, because there is another tricky part. Like in some cases, we are, even though we are adding project ID, which belongs to, we are not adding associated has many. So this may go unnoticed for us that we are missing dependent destroy. So we need somehow to script that to figure out, hey, this foreign key that is today a foreign key doesn't have like dependent, like the has many relation and doesn't have associated dependent type. So that's it. There's another aspect, like I know about at least of the security scans being one table that needs to be denormalized to include project ID. I am aware of this table, so we need to also do kind of backfill of the table.
Oh, this denormalization based on when they're in different databases, we won't have access to join through that to get that. Okay.
Security scans, so this is one of my POC that I noticed that it does cross-join to find the project criteria. So this is, I don't think that I saw more tables. I think there was like one or two that would need this kind of the normalization. But this is the things that I noticed.
So I think I gather from all the things we just talked about there, we could have another, I don't know, 5 engineers working on this now. But that is dependent on us scoping these things in, because we know we need them. But we de-scoped them in the last meeting we had last week. If we scope all these things in, then we do have parallelism on what we're working on.
I'm a little bit dubious of that, just because it feels like a lot of coordination and the team size would be very large. But maybe there is something that can be done there.
And I feel like we have like a lot of senior members in the team that could probably help as coordination points for, several more engineers. That's my opinion on that. And I think we have we're aligned on what those tasks look like. They're pretty, the things that Camille just talked about. Then some of it is stuff he's already put into a merge request that actually just needs to be broken out, put into a smaller merge request, tested really carefully, and merged.
What we can do, we can create split into 2 tracks. One is related to the infra and migration, which is exactly what you're doing, and you work closely with the infra team on figuring out all of the aspects, and we simply split our focus instead of maintaining the common shared focus across all of these initiatives. And we then focus on another aspect, which is the application side. I think right now, according to your plan, these things are to big extent disconnected, at least now.
Yeah, the infrastructure plan and the testing is very disconnected from application changes.
Okay, but is it then fair to say, so that I understand this correctly, it's there's a, like, for this part of people here, right, there, we will try to parallelize as much of the work as possible for the application side, right? That's understood, that's something that we can do. But then there's this parallel track of infrastructure that needs to happen where we don't have the permissions, right, to do that ourselves. And we do need infrastructure to essentially help with that. And given the size and complexity of all of this, this is a large endeavor, right? So like one person is not going to pull that off, I imagine. So if the October do that, even though I don't even think with like 5 SREs or 3 SREs, right, this is going to become more realistic, but without having infrastructure involvement now and them essentially providing these resources, it becomes completely unrealistic. Is that fair? Because we just don't, we wouldn't be able to do the things that are needed for this to actually go into production, because we can't do that. Is that sort of the first thing that we need to be very clear on?
That seems like the biggest thing.
Yes.
Like 50% is application side, 50% is infra and migration and monitoring of that. Simply we control the first 50. We do not control second 50. We can help with the second 50, but we do not control that.
Yeah.
I do want to also bring up that there was a bunch of application changes that we just talked about that were de-scoped. That's kind of the point I was trying to make about parallelism. We de-scoped. We have focus on application changes being related to one table right now, but that means, you know, a developer on our team isn't encouraged to go and remove all the foreign keys today, even though they could. That's like one of a few examples of foreign keys, joins, these things that developers could be working on today. But I think, Camille, maybe do you have some concerns about if we had a developer working on those things, that they wouldn't, it'll be a coordination difficulty?
I'm kind of thinking that like doing this one table, looking at the Tonk MR, I think it's actually the right first step. Because it kind of uncovers like a lot of things, pre-quiz and like post-quiz, that we need to do before we start working bigger stuff. So I think right now my perception is like, let's get over like this single CI table as quickly as possible in whatever form it is, and like let's rework that, because without that I think we cannot really tackle many tables as well. So from what I saw, like I think we have a hefty amount of the problems to solve, and like then we can even like in the application side split our focus on a part of the team that is only like moving the schema changes, breaking foreign keys, and another part of the team that is handling all the load balancing stuff, for example. And then like we kind of merge at some point when we start fixing CI application side of the stuff, where the features will be broken. But I think these like 4 points that we are at, this single table is like is the right first step. And at least in my head, I would not try to twist that yet. I think we need to finish that first.
Yeah,
Okay,
I also think, sorry.
You go.
Okay. Yeah, I also think it's too early to parallelize. We'll probably get confused because we just don't have the setup yet. But that's not necessarily the biggest chunk. The next biggest chunk I'm thinking of is the migration tooling, right?
That's a tricky part, because like if we would let's say designated someone from our team to work with a group of SRE to provision and do replication, physical replication, what is Dylan saying? That's more like the infrastructure procedure rather than like the tooling that we need to build. There is like this concept of the switchover, which is Adam, you work on this working exclusive to kind of do like the switchover dynamically. So this is something that we're gonna be looking at. But I think in the current schema, I think it's like more dependent on the infrastructure rather than actually writing tooling. There is less tooling involved in the current plan. Am I correct, Dylan, or do you see it?
Yeah, we changed all the wording in the epics to not refer to migration tooling as of yesterday, because it isn't really a migration. It is replicating data and changing DNS records. And I think Camille coined the term reverse replication or something was what we decided to describe this as. It just copy everything and then change the connection and delete the things you don't need anymore. And it all happens outside of the application via DNS records. So the application doesn't even see anything change underneath. The config doesn't change in the application. It's a single DNS CNAME record that gets pointed and switched. The application detects, well, the application goes through PG Bouncer. PG Bouncer detects the CNAME changed and resets all connections and sees a couple of seconds of errors. The application, and then what Adam was looking at was retry errors for a few seconds. Be as graceful as possible, in fact. But I'm not even sure how much we need that, because we already have failovers happen in production and they already lead to the same style of downtime for users. Whenever a failover happens, there's always a few seconds of errors that the application needs to in some way support. And what that looks like sometimes is sidekick jobs fail and retry. Sometimes user gets a 500 and they refresh the page. But yeah, that's my thoughts on that. So there's very little application changes associated with all this stuff.
I see.
Yeah, it's like probably the only application change is like somehow ensuring that we can force reconnect and we stop the service discovery or whatever else scenario it would be.
It doesn't need that. The application won't even reconnect to PG Bouncer. PG Bouncer is the one looking at this change in DNS record. Oh. And so the application doesn't even know anything's changed apart from getting errors for a few seconds.
So it's even better. So basically, like, you are dropping existing connections from the PG Bouncer and application simply reconnects. So then like the locking tables would be useful to ensure that we kind of have this period that we can catch up with the replication lag to disconnect, because this is really like needed. But probably application can fail with the 500 for a few seconds while it's happening.
You need somehow to get into maintenance mode. So whether you're going to lock a few tables or stop all traffic or whatever, this is something to be decided. But the easiest way, the less impactful way, is to just lock the tables that you're moving, if we can do it.
Yes, but this is more like, I guess, thing to figure out with the infrastructure what is like the best way to roll out it, right?
Yeah, we discussed that today. I was on a call with Jose just before this one, and we've got a few good plans. One is the locking mechanism, as Adam suggested. Another one is the fact that PG Bouncer could just be blocked from Postgres for a period of time, because we have a dedicated PG Bouncer for writes that is only doing writes, so it could be blocked for a few seconds. And yeah, and what you said before, Camille, it's even better. The application doesn't even see dropped connections. It actually, PG Bouncer dropped its connections to Postgres, but the application itself just sees errored transactions, or transactions that failed terminate, but it never actually drops a connection.
I think the outcome is like that we have to do very little from the application side, right?
Okay, but to get back a little bit onto a higher level, because what's important for me is to understand, you know, given what we know right now, right? Let's say, like, if we had all of the resources that we wanted, you know, is there even a realistic chance that this is going to land in production by October? I give you an SRE team, you know, and whatever needed, because I am not so, and I think maybe Tong, you can speak to this a little bit as well. It's like, how confident are we that that's even sort of possible? Like, if we remove all of the external constraints at this moment.
My perception is that we don't know our confidence level. That's my perception.
Because it's so early in the development cycle.
Yeah, basically, and we haven't scoped out everything. well, we scoped out a lot of things, but we haven't scoped out everything. So it's really hard to know from my perspective.
Okay, so essentially from the application side, like all of the development still needs to happen. So we have some level of uncertainty there, but let's say it's safe to say we work as fast as we can, right? And then from the SRE side, we know that we had this like 50%, we don't control. Without additional support from that team, this is not going to happen as well, right? So you would at least need this. And how complex that is also still maybe not as understood because we haven't involved all of the teams who need to do all of that. Is that also true?
My best case scenario is that we finish the development in 3 months or so, taking into account, just guessing that there's still things we don't know. And then it will take much more longer to deploy, to get something migrated on infrastructure.
And can this be parallelized? Like if we had an SRE team of, I don't know, 4 people tomorrow, right? Would we be in a position where we are ready in like 3 months and then we just need to flip the switch? I imagine that's not how this is going to go, right? It's like you do the changes and then you need to gain all of the confidence in actually.
Yeah, the infrastructure will ask us, what are we going to deploy? And then we'll say, it looks roughly like this. And then they go, I don't know how to deploy that because
like the first thing, like we need to go through this process through staging. Like this alone gonna take some time to do. And on the production, it usually takes 2 or 3 times longer. I mean, like maybe not 2 or 3 times longer, but it also takes significant amount of time. So can we actually like run it on the staging by the October? I don't think so. Like maybe some bits, maybe we start testing replicas because we have most of the work being done. With the migration, like the application can really like talk and we disconnected most of the joins. But this will actually probably uncover like the places that still needs to be fixed. So I think my confidence level is like 30% or 40% that we can run all these standards using replicas by the October. And then if we don't see like any major problems or we need to fix them, it's gonna take accordingly longer on the production.
Are we asking the wrong question here? By why are we trying to fit to October?
Yeah, so this is exactly where I wanted to go now, because it's like this October date, I don't know where it's coming from. I think you said it may come from database scalability. I've heard infradev, right? But like my gut feeling right now, having heard what I have heard, is that I should it's not a sure, that sounds reasonable, let's shave off 50% of the project timeline, but that the confidence level is very low. So I think the other question is, for me, where does this come from? Right? And is the fear here that we will run out of database headroom by October? And so unless we deliver sharding or like decomposition at that point, we will lose .com. And so my question is, if A, is that true? Right? I don't know. And B, if that was true, are there other things that other folks can do in parallel that actually would extend that timeline? Because we are not confident that we can do that in this project, at least to October. Let's say maybe a couple of months later, right? Or something like that. But is there? Yes.
The specific October thing came up in the scalability working group meeting on Monday. Eric asked why our timeline doesn't show that we're delivering by October, and Craig said because we think it's going to take longer than that. And then Eric said, but we already have another document on the GitLab.com stand-up which says by October we have to have major improvements, otherwise we've got a problem. And then Craig said, I think that date needs to be updated to reflect what we know now, plus some other efforts that are ongoing. So actually, it's possibly that just people need to get on the same page about October not being the end time anymore. There is no October deadline. I don't know why it came up as.
I think October deadline was like thing in the past defined, but we improved like our database editor, and like this due date kind of moved forward, but like I guess it's still at state there. So
I think that we should ask, so Jose periodically creates projections about our database health. Maybe we should ask if we can have a new projection and a prediction about how our database health is, because we have run a few initiatives during the past months, and we are still running a few initiatives like the redesign of the CI tables and adding the CI pending builds and running builds, and which are going to help hopefully a lot. So maybe we should have a new projection so that we have a more realistic deadline, because it's important for us to move as fast as possible, but I think that it's also important to have a better understanding of what the database health is right now, if everyone agrees.
I'm gonna add note. Pending builds will not increase capacity. It's not gonna increase capacity. It's gonna increase like resilience of the CI, and it's really like prerequisite for our sharding effort. But what Grzegorz is right now doing, this will not have a significant impact on the database capacity of a single database.
Yeah, but we don't have a problem with capacity. We had a capped CPU. Our problem was CPU, was not capacity on other. So we have no problem with disk or with writes or with anything else. Our problem was CPU spikes due to very expensive queries that were related to size, but so a lot of efforts were driven towards that. So, for example, if we fix a lot of some of the CI problems, if we fix the recursive CT queries and those things, hopefully we have less CPU spikes. And we have more headroom. So, because our problem, we were not capped on capacity yet. On that type of, our resource problem was CPU, not memory or disk, as far as I know.
Yes, but like pending jobs even today, they don't use primary, they are executed on replica. So if you are looking at the CPU usage from the primary perspective, it will not have like it will not make difference because it's using replica always. There was a bug that was a bug that we fixed, that it was using primary in some cases, and it actually like provided a lot of headroom. But I just want to correct like the perception of like what pending builds offers.
Yes,
and
you're right.
And it's not going to offer like what we are looking for. It's really like prerequisite for the sharding effort that we need to do.
You're right on that, but I'm mentioning as one of the things. So, for example, the work by the memory team and the focus work of moving to secondaries and all that work. So those are very important parts, and we should recalculate and check where are we right now, because it's important. And as a group, we depend on that projection, and we should be very clear on where this wall is with respect to where we are right now.
Yes, from what I checked recently, like it was like last week, middle of the last week, load balancing work moved around 10% of the queries out of the primary already, and those like actually noticeable, and like we continue adding more workers to leverage it. So I think it's gonna have pretty noticeable benefit. So. Okay,
but that's to me, for example, it sounds like a very worthy thing to do independent of our own timelines, right? It's like I would very much like to have a yes, in October we're going to run out of headroom, so we need to do many things, or actually that's not true, right? Because I think that adds data that we depend on, so we can accelerate that. Okay, but I don't want to turn this into another one hour long meeting, right? I think overall I'm hearing there's maybe some things we could accelerate by getting additional infrastructure folks, but overall the confidence in just sort of magically delivering this into production in 3 months is pretty low. And it depends on many other folks and on infrastructure capacity and whatnot. And that to me, correct me if I'm wrong here, but my perception is it's an unrealistic target that is not going to happen, even if we really want it to happen. And then we should be open and honest about that. Adam, you've not said much. I want to make sure that. Sorry, I don't want to call you out, but I want to make sure you.
Yeah, I mostly agree that on the migration plan we are heavily dependent on the infrastructure part, and yeah, it's a very difficult migration. I was asked, Greg, that maybe scheduling a downtime could help reducing this complexity a bit, but yeah, I didn't get a definitive answer that we can actually do that. From the application side, I looked at the MR that disables joins and tries to decouple the code from the main database, and that looks very promising to me. There is one concern though. It's working best in most of the test cases, but how will it perform with the current production database? So that's a big question mark for me that we probably need to find out as early as possible and fix it. It's really a problem.
Okay, thank you. And Dylan, you seem the most optimistic. So what are
timeline? I don't think it's really that interesting for me to say when I think all of this will be done. But what I want to not say is, okay, if we don't think we'll be done with all of this by October, I don't want that to be translated to we don't need help from infrastructure team to get this to production until October, because we need help today. We have things for them to do today. I was in a meeting with Jose today, and he's already talking about things that he is potentially going to be working on that can help. But we could have more help that was dedicated working on stuff that we have actionable today.
Okay, that's actually a good shout out, regardless of that timeline, right? So that we're not locked. Yeah, we depend on a lot of on the infrastructure part a lot, and we don't know a lot of stuff. And we at least one SRE would be an integral part of this team. We need this knowledge. Okay, thank you. Thanks for clarifying that. I think that's important to point out. But I think it's also important that having enough SRE support is not actually going to mean that this is going to deploy in October. It just means that we move forward at pace and we're not blocked in some areas.
Might I add, we may be able to fit everything into October. There is some confidence, but I question why we even need to do this. We can parallelize things, we can drop things, right? But again, coming back to why. So yes. There is some. I listed some kind of estimates, but
yeah, well, it's also, I mean, to be perfectly frank, right? There's also the option we could all just not go on vacation, work 24/7, and hope for the best. But I think there's
many
also
things we can do to speed things up. But why do we really do it? Yeah.
Yeah. So I think we need to maybe also be clear that this is very, very unlikely to be delivered, and that why are we faced with this, and also what does the data say? Plus, are there other things that can happen in parallel if there's because this is a very complex thing to do, but maybe there are simpler things that we can do that help us bridge the gap, right? And if that's an option, right, then we should definitely do this, right? But it feels risky to rush the most complex.
Yes, but maybe that's not the question. Maybe that's not what's asked. Maybe we're being asked to come up with some plan to say what is our best estimate right now. Maybe that's all we're being asked for.
Well, I think again, I have as much context here as you. I think the ask is that develop a plan to deliver this by the end of October. And I think like, I think that's the time constraint, right? And I think we have a plan how to do it. We just don't have a plan for how to deliver it in October. And I think actually, like what I've heard now, it feels to me as if, you know, the simple, like the things that you can do to make a plan like this work is add more people, right? That's not necessarily going to make it faster, right? It's a little bit like mythical man month. You know, like add more SOEs is a requirement to even move forward. But even then, you know, you're not going to like actually just do this by October. The complexity of that project sort of leads to a fact where like that seems, well, I guess you can increase the risk profile a lot, right? You can not test things in production and, you know, just do stuff, but I'm not sure that's acceptable, right? So anyways.
Yeah, and can I add one last thing regarding the goal of October? Camille has added an amazing, he's building a blueprint about database sharding. And I really love the picture and the approach there. And we have the same approach now in the database group with a blueprint by Andreas, where there is this discussion, if we want to move that wall away, there are a lot of other things that we are doing and we can do until the point where we are going to break without sharding, without decomposition. So there is what Camille is discussing about debloating or partitioning. And we have on the database group, we have this target now to keep all tables below 100 gigabytes. All those initiatives together, I think will help a lot with moving the wall away.
Yeah, and that then means we have more time to do this effort here, right? Is that correct?
Or maybe not, but at least it seems like, yeah.
Cool. Okay, so
yeah, I would really add that, like, yes, like we should probably like define our timeline, how things we perceive as feasible, and kind of provide like if the concern is like the capacity, this is like the additional things that we perceive from our perspective as worthwhile to do right now. That's gonna we like move this October date.
So, for example, the debloating, the partitioning,
yes,
these kinds of things.
Like we know of the some stuff that we can do today that are of the moderate difficulty that we can do, and we're not really, because like I'm actually having this challenge with the like the efforts that are happening in the parallel on the stuff that we are working. This is also why I started writing this blueprint about like I'm having a challenge that like if we don't debloat stuff first, it will not uncover some of the like misguided like structures in the tables that we use, and it's really hard like to make them the right partitioning decision. But I'm also like having a challenge like how many things we can do concurrently with the like debloating efforts, partitioning efforts, and sharding efforts. Like there is like we need to coordinate that. So we need to pick the right ones that we know that will not really impact our sharding timeline, because of this is like I guess like the more impactful outcome. And now if we, for example, start doing partitioning, which involves a lot of backfill of the data, it can actually make our life significantly harder and delay significantly even our October date. So we need to pick like the things that are easy and fast to execute, that can finish earlier than we are actually gonna be impacted. So what I'm kind of saying, like we can propose alternative things that can happen concurrently to our work that will not impact our work, but will give this headroom and move this October date further. Then it's like, I think this date is already further than today, but move it even further to have much more relaxed timelines to do stuff.
Yeah, so I think this is like going to be quite important. So can somebody volunteer creating a list of parallel efforts, sort of, or concurrent, I think is probably the best word, right? To help with headroom.
Isn't this
that
what
are
the other
not.
database team is focusing on, like already?
Yeah.
Like they would have a list of prioritized things. I think Camille's point might be reprioritize their list if any of the top items are going to make it slow down our timeline. I think if they are doing work that conflicts with ours and will make it harder for us, then we need to get them to start working on that. But I think we're supposed to be under the assumption that the other database team is currently working on buying headroom.
Yeah.
In the database.
Okay, that's fine. All right. I think honestly, like I think there's not that much more to say here. Right? I think we've kind of, I lack the correct English expression for describing this state, but I think we're pretty aligned. So essentially the outcome here is we talk to Marin, he's going to get like a team of 10 people and it's going to be fine. Cool.
Send us cake too, please.
Yeah.
So since we talked about very packed timelines, I'm taking 1 week off in like 2 weeks from now. So
yeah. I'm also going to be on vacation for 2 weeks in July, August, and I'm going to be in the States for 5 weeks from next Wednesday. So you will enjoy your European meetings without me.
And I'm having a baby in 2 weeks. So.
Okay.
And then there's contribute, right, for a week in September.
No contribute for you if you don't deliver sharding.
Sure.
I'm not going anyway, so fair enough. Oh well.
Anything else? We're vastly over time at this point. Cool. I think in general, though, like you're doing, like I see all of the things and work on issues. So thank you very much for the hard work that you're doing. And we're trying, like I'm going to do my best to like manage this situation and help us align yet again. So thanks.
Bye.